Dr. Stanley I. Wolf, and I'm a physician, and my rank was at the Chosin Reservoir was Lieutenant JG in the U.S. Navy Reserve, and this was the 4th of November 1950, and the weather was still relatively warm, and they moved up and moved into a place called Coterie with units at the Marine Division, and then up to Hagaruri, which is where I was stationed, and Hagaruri became the headquarters for the 1st Marine Division at that time. And this is a town just on the south end of the Chosin Reservoir, and that's a large lake-like reservoir, hydroelectric power. So they had a network of lakes up there, and the Chosin Reservoir, that's a Japanese name for it, which stuck with the Koreans called it the Changjin Reservoir. In any event, they put us in an aid station. Half of our battalion moved on up to a town called Sudong-ni, which was on the Yalu River, which was just at the Chinese border. And half of our battalion was still in Hagaru when the Chinese came in and cut off the road and with the roadblocks, and the rest of our battalion we were scheduled to move on up to all the way up to Sudong-ni, and we were unable to get there. So our companies were, as a matter of fact, there was a 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines Company, D Company was the held on to this pass, which was able to hold out for 4 days, and several Medal of Honor were given to the General Davis and other troops that were able to conquer that. But in any event, at Hagaru, we had our casualties from troops fighting in and around Hagaru, defending that position. And east of Chosin was the Army had placed 31st and 33rd Infantry Regiments of the 7th Army, and they had relieved the 7th Marines who had been there east of Chosin first, and they had moved up then west of the Chosin Reservoir north to Sudong-ni, leaving these Army units there with 10 miles north of Hagaru over a winding single-lane dirt road with no hope of resupply, and it was really just stuck them there as if to show that we were occupying North Korea, and they never dreamt that the Chinese would dare come in. And these units fought, but they were overwhelmed by the Chinese, and they had wounded on trucks. The Chinese shot the drivers of the trucks, and if one was blocking the highway, the others couldn't get through. And the Chinese took their time using the wounded as target practice. So any of the wounded who were able got off the trucks, because it was obvious if they stayed they'd be killed, and they got on the ice, and they said the Marines are 20 miles that way. If you can get there, then they'll take care of you. And here they had hundreds of wounded out on the ice trying to get to where we were at Hagaru, and many of them were on the ice for 3 and 4 days. And what happened, there were the Air Force, Marine and Air Force planes spotted these troops, had these wounded troops out on the ice, and the Marine Major or Colonel, he organized a tank infantry group to go up on the ice. They took jeeps up on the ice. It was frozen. It was 40 below zero, keep in mind. And they swept the ice, brought these wounded, and some of them they took right to, they had a small airfield they had scratched out at Hagaru, and they had planes, propeller planes that came in that could take 28 stretcher cases and 32 seated back to Japan. And they would come in, and some of the wounded were so bad they took them right to the airplane and took them. Others they delivered to our aid station, and we weren't aware of other medical facilities, but obviously there were other medical facilities. But we had several hundred that were brought to us. We had to set up separate tents to put them in with a little pot-bellied stove for warmth. And we had these frozen, not frostbite, frozen soldiers in our aid station, and we had been treating them. We'll talk about the equipment that we had that contributed to the casualties, but the Army units that we had coming in, multiple gunshot wounds. As they thawed out, they would start to bleed, and in this case, maybe the cold weather had saved their lives because they were freezing, but they start to bleed, and the problem was, usually in a military situation, you can evacuate to the rear, and if we couldn't take care of suture up a wound or get the shrapnel out or something like that, or splint them if they had a sprain, patch them up for a couple of days, we would move them back to a regimental collecting company, which is behind the line, or to further back to what you call a MASH unit, which I hated that show because it made such a mockery of the terribly wounded people, and I thought it just didn't show respect to the wounded at all. But in any event, that's where they would go, and they could do that.